Command line networking in Windows, part 2. Let's move on to ARP. That's ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. And the ARP command displays and modifies entries in the ARP table or ARP cache. Let's go to our Windows 10 computer and we'll run an ARP-A to see the ARP table. Now, what we see here is we have IP addresses and their corresponding MAC addresses, referred to as physical addresses here. And what this table is going to show are some permanent or static connections. These are network-based. And some dynamic connections, which are connections that we've made during this session while the computer's been on. So, for example, previously we pinged the 172.18.0.1 computer. And when you ping that computer, you get the information back from that network adapter about its physical address, about its MAC address. We also did a ping to the .125 computer. That's the Windows 8.1 Pro computer. And there's its MAC address. Okay, so this is the ARP table. And these dynamic entries are great for viewing and finding out the MAC address quickly of other systems. If it doesn't show up, well, then we could do a ping against that system to the IP and then run the ARP command again to show the table, and it'll show that MAC address. You can also use the ARP-S parameter, and that parameter allows you to add a static entry manually. So let's say I was going to be making connections very often to the .125 computer. I would do an ARP-S to that IP address and type in the MAC address. So in that case, it's going to be 00-0C-29-4F-77-16. Press enter, and it doesn't say anything, but it has added that to the table as a static entry with the -S. So previously here in the table, it showed .125 and the MAC address as dynamic, but if we run that ARP command again, and I'm just getting there quickly by pressing that up arrow to cycle through the commands, but if we do that ARP-A again, and we take a look, and we'll see that it was added here, 172.18.0.125. There's the MAC address, and we see it set up as static. Now, in some cases, you have to assign that to the appropriate interface as well. But that's an example of that. So ARP-A shows this table of information, the resolution from IP address to MAC address. That's from the network layer of the OSI model to the data link layer. Layer 3 to layer 2, because you have to resolve between those. This is the logical address. The IP address is the logical address of the operating system, whereas the physical address, the MAC address, is part of the network adapter. So ARP, Address Resolution Protocol. Next one on the list is TRACERT. TRACERT determines the path to a destination kind of like ping, but it can go step by step by step. It can hop across routers. And so the trace route builds on ping. So let's show an example of that. Clear the screen here, and we'll run the TRACERT command. And we'll do that to one of my domains out on the internet, dprocomputer.com. And we'll let that run. And you'll see what happens here. We get rows of information with 3 pings each to each hop along the way to the final destination. And so, for example, the first step along the way is the firewall that we showed before. That's 172.18.0.1. That's the first step. That's the gateway. And then it goes out the RCN network. That's what I'm using here. But the whole path out through, finally, to my domain, dprocomputer.com, which is stored at a shared server, Zosma at lunarpages.com. Or zosma.lunarpages.com. And it gives the IPs for each of those. Now, if you don't want the name resolution to IP, the domain name to IP name resolution, which can be time consuming depending on your connection, you can do this command with the -D parameter. And when we do so, it just does it by IP address. And usually you'll get that information faster. And don't forget, try all of these commands on your systems within a virtual machine if possible. But try all these commands and go through the different options or switches, and also go through the help file with the /? to find out more about those options. Next on the list is netstat. Netstat's a great command. It shows active connections and ports being used between the local computer and any remote computers that it has a session to. So we'll bring up Windows 10 again, clear the screen, and the netstat command, network statistics, uses a variety of different parameters. If we just type the command and press enter, it'll start showing the active connections on the local address out to foreign systems. For example, websites that you're connecting to, or whatever you might be connecting to. We just have a dynamically assigned port here, 59751, which is connecting out to a public IP to a website using HTTPS, which is port 443, and that is also established. Over time, the session will go into a time wait status, and then it'll go into a closed status. But you could do more with this. You could do more with the netstat command. We could run a netstat-an. And when we do that, we'll get TCP connections and UDP connections. And the N will show it to us numerically. So we can see all the listening ports on our system and all the foreign addresses that we're connecting to on both TCP connection-oriented and UDP connectionless transport protocols. And it keeps going. You can do a netstat-A, netstat-N, a netstat-NAB, which is a nice one. This shows all the connections out to other systems. And it shows the executable that's being used in addition to the IP address and the port of the local and the foreign systems. And so, for example, here's an established one out to a website, 172.18.0.121, and the dynamically assigned port going out. When you see a high-level port, a high-number port like 59751, you can be pretty sure that that is dynamically assigned by the operating system. And that's going outbound to this IP, public IP, and port 443 HTTPS connection that's established using the WPN service. So you can tell what all the services are running here with that -NAB parameter. Let's move on to NBTstat. NBTstat displays network protocol statistics that use NetBIOS over TCP/IP connections. So you can do a lot of things with NBTstat, but quite often I'll use it to show the baseline networking services that are running on a remote computer. You could show the local computer services as well. But let's take a look real quick, and we'll do an NBTstat /? in our Windows 10 command prompt here, and you'll see the various parameters that you can use. The ones I use the most often are -A and -A, but you might also use -C, the -Rs, the -Ss. So you want to know the differences between these. Definitely look at these. But chances are you won't see much of this on the exam or use it too much in the field. I just wanted to show -A real quick. So let's run an NBTstat. And we'll do this with the A so that we can see the services running on a remote system. And we'll connect out to the Windows 8 computer. Oops, that's 125. Press enter, and right away we get that Windows 8 computer information. And you see the name of the computer is Win 8 Pro VM1. And we see a couple things here. We see the 20 service, that's in hexadecimal. 20 is the server service, and we see 00, that's the workstation service. Server service allows this computer to serve information to others. The workstation service allows that computer to go out and grab information from others. And we see it's part of a work group called Workgroup. We'll see the MAC address here. So we get some quick information here. If there was a problem with that system and that system was having an issue connecting out to other computers, well, it could be a workstation service issue. And so we would go in here and see if the workstation service is running. You could also see that from the run prompt. We could go to services.msc and scroll down to workstation and see if that service is indeed running. We know it is on the Windows 8 computer because we see that 00 hexadecimal number there. That signifies workstation service. So that's just one example of NBTstat. You could also do this with the lowercase a, which is designed to be used with the computer name. And we get the same information here. So a little bit about NBTstat, but again, you probably won't use that often. Next on the list is NSLOOKUP. That's name server lookup. It queries a DNS server to discover DNS details, including the IP addresses of host computers. So for example, we'll go back to Windows 10 again. We could run an NSLOOKUP to a particular domain. For example, dprocomputer.com. Press enter, and it gives us a non-authoritative answer that this is the IP. Well, we actually saw this before. That is the IP of the server it's on, 216.97.236.245. And we're using this server to get out. But we could also run this in more of an authoritative mode. We could enter the NSLOOKUP shell. And then from there, we can specify the server and the domain and so on. And there's lots of options here. But we could specify what the server is, the DNS server that we want to use to get this information. And so lots of stuff that we can do here. Not only can we find out information, but we can make changes within DNS servers. And when you're done in the shell, just type exit to get out. But a better tool to use is the dig command. That comes from Linux, but there's an equivalent of that you can install to Windows as part of the bind tools, which you can get from the ISC at this link here. So the dig command's another good one to use. And finally, we have the net command. Now, net is actually a collection of commands. Previously, I think we've already shown net start and net stop for starting and stopping services. There's all kinds of good stuff out there. Here on the exam, they want you to know net use, which is used to map network drives in the command line, and net user, which is used to either add or remove or make changes to user accounts. So they might look alike, but they do two totally different things. And that's just scratching the surface of the entire net command. Let's jump over to this Windows 8 computer. If we type net and do a /?, you'll see all the potential options for the net command, like net view. Let's do a net view. If we do net space view and press enter, we'll see other computers that this computer can see on the network. Each computer is preceded by /. So you know we're talking about a computer name. / computer name. AV editor, that's my main workstation. Win10-VM1, that's the other Windows 10 computer we were just in. and this computer, Win8 Pro VM1. And the command completed successfully. So we can quickly see a list of computers on the network currently. So that's one example, the netview command. Now, netuse and another one, netshare, are good commands. The netshare command can be used to create shares, to share folders in the command line. And then the netuse command, the one they have on the objectives, is used to map network drives to those shares. This is my AV editor system. We'll run a netuse command here. Aha. And you'll see that there is one mapped drive. It's a Z drive, and it's going to this IP. See the double backslash? So it's going to this IP. You could do this by computer name or IP. And then this is the share name of the data. So we can create mapped drives. We could do a netuse and then select a drive letter, P, colon, whatever you want, really, as long as it's available. And then connect by typing double backslash, the computer name or server name, backslash, and the share name, whatever that is. Now, something to keep in mind here, I am in normal mode in the command prompt right now. I am not in elevated mode. If we create a mapped drive using the netuse command in normal mode, then it will show up here in normal mode in the command line. If we do a netuse, it'll also show up in the mapped network drives as the mapped drive here. It's kind of backwards. Z drive, double backslash, the IP address, and then the share name. However, if we create this mapped network drive, if we create this connection in elevated mode, then it won't show up in regular mode in the command prompt, and it won't show up in Explorer. You'd only be able to see it in elevated mode in the command prompt or PowerShell. So it's some interesting stuff there. So I've jumped over to my Windows 10 Pro virtual machine. If we type netuser, the netuser command, and press enter, it'll show a list of the user accounts on this computer. So the administrator account and the main admin account that I'm using that I created is sysadmin. And then we have others, test1, guest, user1, and it says command completed successfully. It lists those accounts. And you can find out more information about a particular account by typing netuser and the name of that account. For example, sysadmin. We press enter and it tells us if there's a full name, any comments, country code, is it active or is it disabled? When was the password last set? Last logon, and the group memberships. So that gives you a nice little bit of information here. And that was the netuser command with the name of the user you want to find out more info about. So instead of going into local users and groups, we can do that here. Instead of going into settings within Windows 10 and going to the family and user accounts, we can just do it here in the command line. Also, you can add accounts. So if we do a netuser/add parameter, and we'll add somebody named test4. That's not a common username, but I'm just doing tests here. Press enter, and the command completed successfully. It's that easy to make a basic user. Then we could find out more information about that by doing netuser space test4, press enter, and it'll tell us that info. And it's that user by default, when we create it, is only a member of the users group. Account is active, but there never has been a logon. I created the user, but the user has not logged on yet. And we'll be talking about logon scripts and profiles and home directories as we get into the Active Directory portion of stuff a little later. All right, so that's the netuser command. Another cool command is the netsh command, network shell, which is where you can go to modify the firewall and other things on the system. You can add and remove IP addresses and all kinds of good stuff, and do a lot of modifications to the firewall from here. That's the NetSH, or the network shell. It's an actual shell you go into, kind of like NSLOOKUP. When you're done, just type exit. So check out NetSH as well. And so there's our commands. And again, to review those last two, netuse, that maps network drives in the command prompt. Netuser deals with user accounts, adding them, removing them, viewing them, analyzing them, making changes. So lots of networking commands here. In the first portion, the first video, part 1, we did IP config and ping, which really should be your focus for the exam. And then in this video, we talked about ARP, Tracert, NetStat, NBTStat, NSLOOKUP, netuse, and netuser, and really the net command in general. So definitely practice these on your systems. I mean, there's so many parameters and options. We can't go through them all, obviously, but it would take a week. But try to practice with these as much as you can, and view those help files and try to do some connectivity between two virtual machines and see how these commands work. All right, so that's it for command line networking in Windows.